Hi, everybody, and welcome again today to another WinPure's weekly webinar. Looks like we've still got some joining here. Of course, at the top of the hour, we'll kind of wade into this a bit just to let everyone join today. My name is Ben Cutler. I'm one of our solutions specialists here at WinPure. I'll be your host today. Just like always, following this webinar, folks that did register for the webinar, you will receive an email from me with links to my online calendar and to some more information, links to the recording, of course. Keep in mind, this is a fairly informal webinar today. We're going to try to open it up for some questions at the end. We do have a few slides to look through today. Also, of course, visit winpure.com for more information, or you can email us to sales@winpure.com. But again, for those just joining, just a quick introduction. My name is Ben Cutler. I'm one of our solutions specialists here with WinPure. I'll be your host today. So just wading into this here at the top of the hour. So I really want to, just thank everyone for joining today. Thank you for your support, your interest, your consideration. I hope everyone is doing well, hopefully from the, the comfort of your own home. Please do me a big favor and subscribe to us on YouTube if this information is useful or interesting for you. We've got a series of different webinars looking at our software and different data quality concepts and initiatives and things like that. So please check us out on YouTube. A few quick webinar reminders here is that everyone is on mute, but you can ask questions using the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. Like I said, I'll try to leave at least a few minutes at the end of this webinar to take questions if any come up. We may run just a bit over the 30 minutes today, especially if we do get some questions coming in. Also, new to this webinar today, you'll see that I've attached a handout here, and you'll find that on the GoToWebinar control panel for anyone that would like to download that. Today, we're really looking at data matching and kind of hoping to do some critical thinking. So a bit of background about the company for folks that might be joining for the first time, folks just hearing about WinPure. WinPure, founded in 2003. Our software is award-winning worldwide. We have thousands of partners and clients all over the world. Our software is #1 on G2 Crowd. That's a data quality solution. The software is clean and match. We have that software available for budgets of just about any size. It's very plug and play. We have a free trial available. And it's very simple to download and to install. So feel free to request that on the website. Also, some of the problems that we help to solve also around data quality for the most part. But again, just hopefully to put some of this in context. Keywords, some of the problems, the initiatives that we can help with. The most common is deduplication, but also data integration, data migration, data quality, data cleansing, master data management, merge purge, single customer view, record linkage, address verification, single source of truth, things like that. So a variety of different potential problems that we can help solve and a variety of potential initiatives that we could be involved in at any given time. So the topic today, as you can see on your screen, is data matching. So, what is it? Some of you, for some of you, this is going to be obvious, right? For some of you joining the webinar today or watching this recording later in time, the concept of data matching is going to be fairly obvious. Essentially data matching is, I often refer to it as error tolerant text matching, right? It's commonly referred to as deduplication. Like you can see on your screen here, we've got, people names, 2 sources of data, people names, company names, items, addresses, email addresses, and things like that. And while they're, these two different records, so to speak, while they are, slightly different in a variety of different ways, they may or may not, be considered essentially the same entity at the end of the day. So data matching is really the process of finding hidden or less obvious relationships within and across different sets of information. Similar company descriptions, similar product descriptions, similar addresses, similar people names, trying to identify those relationships. And, for a lot of people, it's a big leap just to wrap their heads around those concepts, right? Why is this needed? How does it work? But when you really start to get serious about data matching, you realize that what you're doing might be more appropriately referred to as entity resolution, which has a much higher perceived business value. Resolving entities and identifying relationships or linking and grouping different manifestations of the same or similar real-world objects, right? That's a pretty technical explanation. So really going kind of a level or two deeper with the concepts here. Let's take a step back here and just try to keep it in a nutshell here and simple to understand. What are some of the obvious problems here? Some of the visible problems. Some of these things we've discussed on other webinars. Some of the more visible, more obvious reasons that data is difficult to match. The first obvious or more visible problem here is that data is really just a description. We've talked about this on previous webinars. The names, the words, the abbreviations, and the descriptions that we refer to as data, these are really just descriptions, right? And descriptions are inherently very unique and at least slightly different from record to record. These unique descriptions make it difficult to match. These could even be, minor differences like spelling errors or nicknames, aliases, things like that. Just different ways of describing, maybe the same user of, the same unit of measurement, for example. If you look on your screen, you'll see a few of these examples here. A 40-inch LG 4K television, could essentially be the same item as something described as a 40-inch LG UHD flat screen, right? The meaning there is important, right? The meaning in the descriptions and things like that. So, those are some of the more obvious problems, just dealing with descriptions. But then we also have disparate systems, right? Let's not forget that in the context of data matching, this data usually lives in different systems. So not only are the descriptions going to appear slightly differently, but the formatting or the structure or the data schema could also be very different. The systems likely contain different attributes. Some systems containing more complete information, full names, email, phone, multiple addresses. Other systems containing just partial names and partial addresses. And most of this data isn't going to contain any definitive unique identifiers that would make this much easier. Such as a national ID number or a tax identification number, for example. So again, descriptions and disparate systems, all of these are, more obvious, reasons or problems that make it difficult to match data. Also, fragmentation, what's commonly referred to as fragmentation. This is a big one. This surrounds the completeness of the information within and across disparate sets of information. So whether or not the information exists and to what extent it could be considered complete, right? And ambiguity, right? Ambiguity comes in all shapes and sizes, partial information making it difficult to work with, conflicting information that clouds the decision-making process, the recency of the data, the accuracy of the data, multiple different versions of the truth. All of these concepts are important, right? This is going, into, this is really dealing with, again, a lot of the things that we can ultimately see on the screen, right? Things that, are more visible. So, when we talk about data matching, there are some, best practices, right? Clearly state and maybe even document your objectives. The first layer of definitions, right? Early assumptions about what kinds of cleansing might be needed, what the output, should probably look like. What is a duplicate record? Profiling or interrogating the data to reduce the number of unknowns and to really drive additional decision making, especially surrounding the process of cleansing and matching the data, right? This is pretty high level stuff, and we've talked about this on multiple occasions. Also cleansing and normalizing the data to make it more useful, either for general purposes or for very specific purposes, such as making the data more matchable, right? And then matching the data, putting some rules in place, running some iterations, reviewing the results to identify, other peripheral opportunities, problems, unknowns, things like that. So again, this is what we've discussed time and time again. But our goal today is to take it, a layer or two forward, which is difficult, and it's especially difficult to make that information relevant to, people from all over the world dealing with different data sets, different business initiatives, different, purposes, different priorities, and things like that. But all of those are key considerations. So our goal today is to get you thinking about some of the things beyond the data as you see it on your screen. To get you thinking beyond the more visible problems that we've been looking at thus far. So really using purpose, priorities, goals, data understanding, and data matching as part of your data strategy. We've worked hard to simplify very complex problems and very complex concepts to make the information more useful to anyone joining these webinars or to watching them in the future. Today, we want to hopefully encourage you to think about, data matching as a critical business activity to solve problems, to increase efficiency, to better understand your business, to personalize communications, and, to think about the bigger picture. So the goal today is to help you to start implementing some of the practical skills that we've discussed in other webinars into a thought experiment of sorts and into a formalized data strategy and a process that is likely to trigger a variety of additional questions. Somebody just feedback to these webinars. Somebody recently suggested that we have a webinar on some of the more esoteric concepts about why we match data. And that is such a big topic here. We're going to try to touch on some of that today. I mean, I feel like we regularly scratch the surface on this. On multiple webinars, we've talked about different, use cases for data matching. But of course, we're really just seeing the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. they say it takes, what is it, 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. So of course we could never fit all of this into, just a few short webinars, right? But, the point here is that data matching isn't just deduplication. That's one way to look at it. That's one, business initiative, so to speak. But there are so many different opportunities for data matching within the organization. And, beyond just the type of data and beyond the general data quality issues and some of those more obvious or more visible problems that we've been talking about, there's so much more to know. So today we're, hopefully going to do, a bit of brainstorming or critical thinking. So before we move into a short data story, I just want to be clear that, from organization to organization, from industry to industry, area of business to area of business, your objectives, your definitions, your purpose, your requirements, your priorities, your use cases, your limitations, and your process is always going to vary, right? So we often look at, the software and try to keep things simple and, import your data, do some data quality profiling, do some, simple cleansing and standardization, normalization, put some rules in place, do some data matching, and it doesn't have to be incredibly difficult, right? We've got a tool that was built for this, but when it comes to, a question of data strategy and process, there's a ton of opportunity there, and there are a ton of other, unknowns and potential, problems and opportunities and things like that. So there are some best practices, and that's what we look at kind of week to week, and we discuss that kind of at a high level. And there are tons of theories around this, but each scenario is going to be very, very unique. So I'm going to flip over, just switch over to a quick data story, just looking at the software here. Just give me a second to transition. All right, great. So a quick data story here, again, just to hopefully inspire some critical thinking around data matching, right? So I have a few different scenarios and kind of looking at this layer by layer and for different purposes, right? So again, we get a lot of questions. Let me just take a quick, okay, all right, I just saw a question come in. We get a lot of questions surrounding process, right? And a lot of the times, the expectation is that the process is going to be really simple and straightforward, and there are solutions out there with just a click of the button, are going to solve your data quality problems. It's an interesting reality, that perception exists, but it's true. So we've got people at all different ends of the spectrum, so to speak, in terms of their perception of what is data quality, what kind of solutions are needed, and what is that process going to look like. So again, today, drilling into that a bit more in detail. So what you see on your screen here, you can see, what I've referred to as this layer one. And, we've got my name over and over again, Ben Cutler. And so I just want to present you with kind of a scenario here. Assuming that this is the full extent of the data that is available to you, and assuming that your purpose is really just simple deduplication. When you look at the data that you see on the screen here, my question to you is, how many groups of duplicates do you see here? Right? So again, I'm gonna read that back to you, right? I want this to be very clear. Assuming that this is the full extent of data that you have available to you, And assuming that your purpose is deduplication, how many groups of duplicates do you see on the screen here? Well, in that context, I see one group, right? In that context. And that context is really important, right? Again, purpose, reason, goal, right? Priorities, all of those things are going to be really important when putting together a data strategy and a process that really works for you, right? So let's take a look at this second scenario here. Layer 2. So layer 2, we've got a bit more information on the screen here, not just names, but we also have some information on the state, on the county, on the city. We start to see some variance here in the city quite a bit. Also the address and even hair color. So again, the scenario here, assuming that this is the full extent of the data that you have available to you, but now not just for deduplication, but also for mailing purposes, how many groups of duplicates do you see on the screen here? Right, and I'm gonna read that back just to make sure that this is very clear. Again, the intention here is to inspire some critical thinking beyond just the simple best practices of data matching, beyond the data quality issues that you can see on your screen, but also thinking about purpose, goals, priorities, limitations, right, and things like that. So again, I'm going to read this back. Assuming that this is the full extent of data that you have available to you, and assuming that your purpose is now deduplication for mailing purposes, how many groups of duplicates do you see here, right? In the first scenario, layer 1, we had just a single group of duplicates, right? We only had first name and last name. It was just deduplication. In this scenario, layer 2, we have more information. We also know some, we have some information about the location and even, hair color, right? So again, assuming this is for, deduplication and mailing purposes, I see 4 groups of duplicates on the screen, right? In that context, right? Why do I see 4 groups? Well, I see 4 different cities, right? That's a clue, right? We're getting beyond essentially the ambiguity here, right? I see 4 cities and 4 seemingly unique addresses, right? 1 from each city. So I see 4 groups of potential duplicates, right? This is also a question of, not just purpose and use case and goals and priorities, but also, again, there's always a level of ambiguity, right? Let's look at the next exercise here, layer 3. So similar exercise, but again, we've got some more information on the screen here, right? If we take a look here, we've got all of the same information. We still know essentially it's the same name. A couple of different counties, 4 different cities, 4 different unique addresses here. Looks like hair color is really all the same now. Different, similar, but different next of kin. It looks like similar height, similar, perhaps very distinct professions, and a few different email addresses, several different phone numbers. So similar exercise, but we've got some additional information here. But again, in context, there's so many different use cases, purposes, goals for data matching, right? So in this scenario, let's assume that this is for credit check purposes, right? So you've got essentially, several different, records here for Ben Cutler. Some of them are, in the same county. Some of them are in the same city, some at the same address, so on and so forth. But again, this is for now credit check purposes, not for mailing purposes. In that context, how many different groups of matches do you see? How many different groups of potential duplicates do you see? Are there, 4 different people here? Or is this potentially the same person and potentially requires some additional review, potentially requires, some reference data, so to speak, right? To help us understand maybe address history or something along those lines, right? So again, that context, the reason, the purpose, the goals, the priorities, the limitations, all of this is critical when putting together a process for this type of work. Let's look at this 4th scenario here, and then we've got a few more slides. We're at about that half-an-hour mark, so I can see we're going to run a bit over here, but that's okay. If you do have to run at that half-an-hour mark, we appreciate you joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day, but for those who want to stay, we've got some more information here. So taking a look at the 4th layer here, and what we're doing is essentially we're enhancing our view and we're adding some reference data, like what I just mentioned, like a history of addresses, right? So now that we have, as you can see on the screen here, this reference data, this address history, when we match this data to the reference data, we now have a more complete view. We now have a better understanding, and we can then use that to make better decisions. All right, let's jump over here to the match screen. We've set up some rules, take a look at the results, and we can see that we have a single group of matching records here, right? Everything matching back to the reference data. 13 records here. Again, 1 on the reference data, 12 on the layer 3 here. Essentially just saying, look, on this reference data, this is a history of addresses. All of these addresses exist in the reference data, right? So again, there are a variety of potential approaches here. There are a variety of use cases, right? So again, a bit of critical thinking, and what you'll see in the handout that I've attached are, some of those general best practices, some of the tools that you would use to, do this type of work, some tips in terms of, potentially a better approach to putting together a process for this type of work, taking into consideration purpose, definitions, goals, priorities, limitations, things like that, and a few different exercises. You'll see that attached. So that is a quick data story here. I hope that was useful for everyone. Let me jump back over to the slides here. Again, I've got a few other things to share with you before we wrap up today. Great. So again, different use cases, right? I've been mentioning this a few different times now, and there are so many different use cases. So I'm just going to try to keep it at a high level here, but this is really important when you're trying to put together a process for something like this. Again, if it's something like deduplication and list matching, and it's a low priority, and it's not perceived as being something of very high value, then you can keep it simple, right? Import the data, maybe do some data profiling to better understand the data. Do some quick cleansing and normalization. Set up your rules for matching. Look at your output. Maybe run a few iterations. But a lot of the times, again, when we talk about data matching, it really is a part of critical business activities that are driving efficiencies and cost reductions, and identifying revenue opportunities and things like that. So a few different use cases here. Data integration. When you think about integrating disparate data sets from different areas of business, there's a ton of opportunity here. This isn't usually a low value initiative at all. If if you think about this in more detail, you've got, different areas of business all essentially using, different business applications and different sets of information, very similar to, information that's being used in different parts of, other parts of the business, but slightly different with minor differences and, different attributes and different, customer IDs and things like that. So a lot of different opportunities there at the end of the day. So when you think about data integration, what is it worth to an organization to better understand relationships with your customers or with your vendors? What is it worth to better understand your business, right? The next one here, deduplication. Again, this is typically viewed or perceived as a lower value activity. It's one of the primary data quality issues, so it's very, very common. But when people use these keywords, in my experience, they usually don't see much value in the opportunity. It's usually more, perceived as an operational requirement, just something that needs to be done. And that's fine, but, with the right vision and support, an effective data strategy could help you to uncover literally decades of hidden business value. The next one here is master data management. Again, these are just 3 examples. There are so many others, but anything related to master data management, this is typically perceived as being more critical. So again, anything if you're doing some data cleansing, some data matching, and if that's directly supporting your master data management infrastructure, it's safe to say that this is going to be perceived as a high value activity, right? And data cleansing and data matching is used in master data management in a variety of different ways. An organization that has implemented a structure for master data management, there's so much opportunity there, right? They have a data strategy in place. And the cleansing and matching, this is used for, everything from the initial master data management, system loads to the daily batch loads, also the real-time interactions, typically required for like transactional data, database search, and just general data operations. So there's a ton of opportunity there, and this is typically perceived as being a higher value activity. So again, those are some of the use cases. Let's talk about purposes. And again, these are just a few examples here, but improved data quality. This is oftentimes it's fairly generic, in terms of a way to describe a purpose or a goal, but it can be fairly difficult to build a business case here. But that really is the underlying expectation for any effective business systems, right? Also, again, looking at purposes and goals, improved user experience, which is much more interesting, usually viewed as a pretty valuable component. Increased compliance, and this one could go either way. In some scenarios, it's just increasing efficiency and checking the boxes. But in other scenarios, the organization has real economic interests in their compliance activities, and data cleansing and data matching is a big part of that. Revenue opportunities, this is a broad one. If you think about the market disruption today, it's mostly driven by technological innovation, a lot of which is driven by data insights and or by the data itself, which, the data isn't usually acquired organically through day-to-day business activities. More often than not, the data has been curated and the data is the product, or at least a part of the product. So again, when talking about the value of the use case, the value of your purpose for the data, these components should really be driving decisions around your process and the investment that you're going to make in something like data cleansing and data matching, right? Finishing up here, looking at priorities. There's a lot of different priorities, and some of those are going to surround process, others around the solution itself. A few examples here around the process priorities. Sometimes it's a single customer view. Sometimes preserving all unique information or capturing all of the let's say unique information that you have across these duplicate records or across these different business systems. Again, these different business systems really housing essentially at the end of the day, housing slightly unique sets of information, right? So if you can pull all of this together, you've got a much more comprehensive, a much more complete view of a customer purchasing history, of their address history, something that we looked at previously during the data example there. You've got additional contact information. You might have multiple email addresses, multiple phone numbers, things like that. So there's a ton of different opportunities there. But preserving that unique information, cleaning source systems, better quality outcomes, looking at moving from one type of hierarchy to another hierarchy. So that at the end of the day here, there's a lot to talk about. And again, I did attach here a handout for everyone to take with them. We're not going to be able to cover all of this in one webinar or even a series of webinars, right? There's just so many use cases, so many opportunities and purposes and priorities out there. But hopefully today's webinar really does kind of inspire some additional critical thinking about how data cleansing and data matching can help to drive a more effective data strategy within your organization here today. So I want to thank everyone for joining. If there are any questions today, I'll go ahead and stick around for a few minutes. I haven't seen any questions come in thus far, but again, just want to thank everyone for joining today. I really hope this was useful. I hope it was interesting, easy to follow along. I hope it's something that you appreciate today. Looks like we might have one question, at least one question here. So again, I'm going to hang out for any additional potential questions that might come in. Anyone that does need to wrap up today, again, thank you for joining. Let's take a look here. Will there be any more technical webinars in the future explaining how the tool really works? More a technical dive? Yeah, absolutely. And those typically require a lot less preparation. It's a lot easier to make that relevant for everyone on the call. But there are a lot of people out there that really appreciate the theory behind all of this. So again, that's important too, right? All of these components that we're looking at today, the purpose for the data, the reason, the intelligence that you have, the use case, the value of the initiative, and creating a process, all of that's going to be critical when doing this kind of work. But yeah, absolutely. And please check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel there. We've got lots of great content looking at very specific ways to cleanse and standardize and normalize data, to profile data, to match and deduplicate and things like that. We've got quite a bit of content there, so please subscribe to us on YouTube. Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate the all of the feedback there. Appreciate all of the words of thanks and everything. So Again, doesn't look like any additional questions coming in here today. Feel free to reach out to me by email. You'll get one from me following this webinar, again, with a link to the recording, a link to my online calendar. Feel free to schedule a time with me if you'd like to discuss something in more detail. But again, thank you everyone for joining today. Really appreciate your time, your consideration, your interest. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, and have a great rest of your week.